Hello, everybody. How are you enjoying the day? Is it good? Yeah? Yeah? How good? This good? This good? This good? Okay. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome our next guest, David Hamilton. I'm sure he doesn't need much of an introduction. David is the author of how many books?
7.5.
7.5 books. So there's one in production? Yeah, okay. Many of which you've probably read quite a few of his books. One's called, is it Every Thought That Counts?
It's the thought that
It's the thought that counts. How your mind can heal your body.
That was the third one.
That was the third one.
Destiny versus free will.
Say again?
Destiny versus free will.
Destiny versus free will. And the latest book you're working on is, you can't reveal the secret.
I Heart Me, The Science of Self-Love.
I Heart Me, The Science of Self-Love. I think something that we all need a little bit more of. Now, I've known David for 7 years, 8 years, 9 years. I've been on workshops with him. I've done a couple of things with him. We've walked through fire together. We've broken arrows on our necks together. And so it's really good to have him here. I see him more as a friend rather than just a colleague. And so please, could you give a very warm welcome to Dr. David Hamilton.
Thanks very much, Rob. That was a very nice introduction. The complete opposite to an introduction I once got in America. I was speaking a couple of years ago in New York City. And you know, in America, there are huge big things. And it was this auditorium. It was half the size of a football stadium. And I was really, really nervous because I'd been sandwiched in, I'd just been added to the billing. Everyone that was speaking that day were regulars in Oprah. And my publisher, Hay House, had decided just to try and raise my profile in America by sandwiching me in between some of the bigger speakers. So I felt really nervous, like no one knew who I was. But then I felt a bit better knowing that the event director was giving amazing introductions. So when everyone was coming on, each speaker came on, the event director gave a massive big spiel of all the different things they'd achieved and all the books, and New York Times #1 and Oprah's best friend and all that kind of stuff. And they were all huge introductions. So by the time the speaker came on, the audience were giving them a standing ovation. You know what they're like in America? Whoa, amazing, yo! And I thought, well, at least the introductions are really good, so that will relax me. So I was standing at the side of the stage, waiting on my introduction, feeling my heart was racing because I was so nervous, thinking, well, at least I'll get a nice introduction. The audience will be nice and warm. Great, that will help. And the event director walked on and she said, so our next speaker is David Hamilton from across the pond. And all you heard rippling through this huge auditorium was and I panicked and then fell onto the stage. So thanks for that, Rob, because that was actually so much better than the one in the States. So yeah, Rob and I we've been friends for years, and we have a lot of similar ways of looking at the world. And what I'm going to talk about tonight is a lot of the stuff that I do. For those of you who don't know me, I guess in some ways a legalized drug dealer. No, not really. I used to work for a big pharmaceutical company called AstraZeneca, and I used to build, and I mean build, sticking atoms together. I used to build drugs for cancer and heart disease, literally sticking atoms together until you constructed a shape that resembled something that was found in a plant. And then we'd make 10,000 versions of it and test all of them to see if you could get something to work better. But what fascinated me more than doing that, I have a PhD in organic chemistry, so that's really how I got into that kind of stuff. But what I loved more than anything was in the testing of the drugs, realizing just how many people improved on placebos because they believed they were getting the drugs. I mean, my main field was cardiovascular, and it's not uncommon when you give like 100 patients a cardiovascular drug to have maybe 75 of them improve. It's not uncommon to give 100 patients a placebo, which is usually made of sugar and blackboard chalk, mostly. And when you get 75 people improving on the drug, to get 65, 67, 70, 73, 74% sometimes improving on the placebo because they think they're getting the drug. And I found that so interesting that I eventually had to leave the industry and start researching how your mind shapes your body and your health, and how your mind even shapes your reality. And so I started writing books and all that kind of stuff. And I'll guarantee everyone in this room has experienced a placebo effect. Hands up if you've ever had a paracetamol or an aspirin. So an aspirin or a paracetamol, so just about everyone, a headache tablet. Well, then you will have experienced a placebo effect. And I don't mean that the headache tablet doesn't work, because of course it does. But the fact that you go into a shop and buy it, or take it because it's in your cupboard, tells me on some level you must believe in it. Otherwise you wouldn't take it. The fact that you believe in it actually makes it work better. If you didn't believe in it, it works worse. And what you've got is the actual chemistry of a drug is that good. If you believe in it, it's that good. And if you don't believe in it, it's that good. And the difference between the best it could be and the worst it could be is actually in your own head. If you go into a supermarket, you can buy mass market paracetamol for 15 pence. You can buy Panadol for about £1.50. Most people know that paracetamol and Panadol are the exact same thing. But yet Panadol works about 25% better than paracetamol. If you map the statistics from aspirin, then you could say Panadol is about 25% better than paracetamol. And you think, well, how is that? Because it's exactly the same molecule. The chemistry is exactly the same. The reason why it works 25% better is because it's 10 times the price. Because we've got a little story in our heads that says, if something is more expensive, then it must be better. Right? And we've met that in our experience so many times all throughout our lives that we've internalized it. And what I mean by internalized it is you've met that in your experience all throughout your life. In other words, if you buy something, and if you buy a new blouse for £10 and another blouse for £110, most people have had the experience that the one you paid more for was better. So we meet this in our experience every single day. And because we meet it in our experience, we internalize it. It becomes so deep in our minds that it's completely unconscious. But when it affects us is when we get a more expensive drug. We don't even think it must be better. It's an unconscious assumption that drives chemistry in the body. Similarly, if you go to a very expensive therapist, you often get better results from someone charging half the price. Nothing to do, and I don't mean, obviously, there's difference in qualities in therapists, but if you had two people with the exact same ability and one person charged twice as much, you would probably find that most people would improve better because they have an unconscious assumption that that person would be better. And so most people, in fact, just about everyone has experienced placebo effects and experience placebo effects all the time. A similar kind of thing goes on with Viagra. And I'm not asking for a show of hands. Right? But we know who we are. Sorry, you know who you are. But one of the ways that Viagra works so well, one of the reasons it works so well is because its name is Viagra. And that taps into a little trick of neuroscience, of how memories are stored. And I know a lot about how memories are stored. When I was a student at university, I unofficially broke a memory world record by memorising the order of a deck of cards in 1 minute and 57 seconds after 8 cans of Hamden Lager, which back in the late 80s was a delicacy that you could buy 12 cans in Scotland for about £3. And I think I'd finished 8 cans, and everyone was doing party tricks. At student parties, everyone does this stuff. And it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and one guy gets out the guitar and plays a lovely song, and someone had a saxophone at the party. They're playing it. And as usual, someone put a condom up their nose and pulled it out their mouth, But everyone had a cool trick, and I thought, I need to do something cool. And the only thing I knew how to do was memorise stuff. I'd learned this memory system that taps into a little trick of neuroscience that means if you can create pictures and weave them into a story, then you can store things closer in the brain. If two things sound the same or can be connected in a story, then you link them in the brain. And this is how the memory system works. Basically, you take 52 cards in a deck of cards, and there's a little translation code where you turn a card into an image, and then you just weave a story together. And the trick is how fast can you weave a children's story out of 52 images. But anyway, it taps into the same way that Viagra works. Because if two things can be connected in a story or sound the same, then they're connected in the brain. And if you think of one, it will initiate the other and the chemistry that goes with it. So one of the reasons that Viagra works so well is because it's called Viagra, because it happens to rhyme with Niagara. Right? And think of what Niagara represents. Well, it's straight, and it's powerful, and there's actually a little curve at the top as well, and there's lots of froth at the bottom. Anyway, I'll stop. So when a person takes Viagra, part of the meaning or the chemistry of Niagara, of what that means, actually is connected to the word Viagra, and it actually amplifies it. Think about it. Do you think Viagra would be as good if it was called Flopsy? No. Because Flopsy symbolises something else altogether. So here you have it's the exact same chemistry, but the difference between the best it could be and the worst it can be is actually in your own mind, isn't it? It's in your head. It's in something that's going on in your mind, in the way in which you think or believe, that's actually changing the way in which chemistry plays out in the body. And we do this all the time. You know, there was a study a couple of years ago that looked at the link between stress and heart disease. And there's a very well proven link. If you look at any population study, then what you'll find, if you look at the statistics broadly, what you'll find is the people who are most stressed have the most incidences of cardiovascular disease. So in other words, if you look at public health records over 20 years, then what you will normally see is the people who tend to be the most stressed have a lower lifespan. Right? In other words, over a period of time, more people who are highly stressed will die than the people who are not very stressed. And that's what you would normally see. But a couple of years ago, scientists did a clever study. And not only did they measure the link between stress and heart disease, but what they also did is they asked each person, do you believe that stress is bad for you? And it turned out what they believed made all the difference. Because in the high stress group, the people who were really stressed, but in that group, there was a subset of people who didn't really believe that stress was bad for them. In fact, they believed that stress was good for them. The death rate was very low. Yet you had a group who had hardly any stress at all, but they believed that stress was bad for them, and the death rate was really high. So the death rate was higher in the low stress group among the people who believed that stress was bad for them than it was in the high stress group in the group who didn't believe that stress was bad for them. In other words, the belief itself had completely turned around the chemistry of stress in the body. And if you actually look at, if you extract the statistics out of that, then what you'll find, in the year that the study was done, the belief that stress is bad for you, not stress itself, but the belief that stress is bad for you, was, I think, the 15th leading cause of death in the United States. Not stress, the belief that stress is bad for you. It's the first time I've ever noticed a belief being listed in death statistics. So here you have the belief that stress is bad for you seem to be worse than stress itself. And I'm only telling you that because what you believe and what you think actually sways the chemistry of your body. If you put chemistry in a test tube, right, A plus B equals C, right, you mix chemistry in a test tube, it will play itself out in exactly the same way. A plus B will always equal C, and let's say it takes 1 minute and 57 seconds. Then 100 times out of 100, A plus B in that test tube will turn into C in 1 minute and 57 seconds. But as soon as you put human